gets a goal? Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Hello everyone, and so we're here again at the end of yet another block of fixtures and heading into the second of the trilogy of international breaks we're burdened or blessed with, depending on your disposition towards FPL at the moment, at the beginning of every campaign. And as we go into that break, the Premier League weekend led yet again some topsy-turvy results as the robot blanks once more, leading to some doing well because of, or indeed in spite of, his newfound impotence at the moment. But hey, Wolves and Southampton coming up after the break. I'm sure all will be right with the world very, very soon. But this episode, we're continuing with our tradition of stepping back and looking at the wider picture a bit. And you'll notice it's not just Sam and I this week. We're also joined by Nick, beloved former founding co-host, and for those who don't know, my childhood friend as well. Great to see you back, mate, even though technical difficulty, if you watch on YouTube, mean he's on his phone, which we're reliably informed is on 57% battery and will last us for the majority of this pod at least. How are you?
Yeah, I think we'll be okay. Yeah, I'm not too bad, thank you. Just getting on with life and everything. Looking after the two kids, enjoying FPL podding retirement, or seeing as I'm back this week, a mini retirement, if we were to use the parlance of Gary Neville. Certainly enjoying FPL this season, which no doubt we'll be covering shortly. Of course, we're joined by Sam as well. How are you, Sam?
Yeah, good. Thank you, Nick. And it's great to have the gang back together. And I'll be a bit of a bystander at times today, and going back to the days of old where I'd listen in on a Tuesday to both of you going on about FPL. So I'm really looking forward to this one. As always, of course, we are Who Got the Assist. On today's pod, it is, as Tom mentioned, a bit more of a zoomed out pod, as is custom for us during the international break, using Nick's appearance to dig into how different levels of engagement with FPL can help or hinder you as a manager when you're making decisions. Plus, we'll start the ball rolling on what we'll discuss into the next week, touching upon how we'll be approaching the key men in FPL over the next block of 4 fixtures before the final, thank God, international break this side of Christmas. We will leave all the usual pod features and the week ahead preview for next time. Bold claims, etc. will wait as well. But we will, of course, end with a preliminary look at how our teams are looking ahead of the next game week, with the caveat that obviously anything can happen during the international break. It is Monday, the 7th of October. All the games are done and dusted, so we can kick straight on with the game week reviews, starting, of course, with our star man, Nick. How did you do? And I think we know already, but worth mentioning, how's your season going so far, Nick?
Well, the season's going brilliantly. 393rd in the world, which is just frankly ridiculous. Yeah, just going really, really well. I think this game week it was 59 all out. I kind of escaped with a green arrow, to be honest, and it was just thanks again to the captain pick. So haven't had a captain blank all season, and that's just really helped propel me into sort of the upper echelons. That's one of the key factors behind my sort of success, I suppose, this season. I was actually originally on Haaland at the start of the week, but as the week went on, I kind of just considered the successes, I suppose, of the previous week, where I kind of went for a bit of a punt on Palmer, and I reviewed the fixtures and decided just to put it on Saka. It was actually the podcast to a certain extent, because I think, Pricey, you were talking about Saka on the last pod, and you were talking about, seeing him live and how brilliant he was. And I was like, you know what, actually, Southampton at home as well versus Fulham at home, when, Haaland's been kind of a bit quiet in the last couple of games, and Fulham's a slightly tougher fixture. So I just stuck it on Saka kind of a little bit last minute, and yeah, definitely massively helped, because the rest of the team is just a bit of a damn squib, really. The rest of the team, only a couple of assists from Lewis and Palmer, and everyone else. And Sanchez got a couple of saves points, I suppose, but everyone else blanked. So delighted with that. No red arrows this season, but yeah, up to 393rd in the world, just insane. So yeah, delighted, but yeah, I suppose not really the best of weeks. The captain really just saved me this week again.
Yeah, you needed to be on last week, didn't you, with the Palmer 50-point captain? I mean, that has to be possibly one of the best moments of like anyone's FPL career. Like, those are points that, considering that Palmer wasn't particularly highly owned in the wildcard template, considering that many people wouldn't have, even if they did wildcard Palmer in, the likes of FPL General we mentioned last week. Everyone was kind of on Haaland or somewhere else for that weekend. So I mean, those are points that are going to stand you in really good stead for the rest of the year, because those are 50 points that suddenly most of the field is chasing. Like, how did that feel? That 50 points are coming in, because that's propelled you, hasn't it, out of nowhere. Like you said, you had a really bad start, and then suddenly, hey presto, you're up in the top 1,000 within a week.
Yeah, exactly. I think, game week 3, I was about 3 million overall rank, which was pretty poor. And that's why I wildcarded early. And ever since I wildcarded, just everything's gone right. It's almost like the perfect wildcard to a certain extent. So I got a bit lucky, as you know, with like sort of Sanchez getting penalty saves and Luis Diaz, like not just matching Salah, but outscoring Salah. And even the week where everyone captained Salah, like I captained Haaland, and he got that goal against Arsenal before everything collapsed a little bit in that game. But yeah, I think it's just been ridiculously successful. And then even at that point when I captained Palmer, I was doing pretty well. I was overall rank 36k before that game week. So just from the wild card going from 3 million to 36k, I thought, you know what, I'm doing well. I'm going to go for a bit of a punt here. I quite like the idea of Palmer against Brighton. Brighton looked a bit open at the back, and no one else owned him. I looked at all mini leagues. I was actually, no one owns this guy, so screw it. I'll just put the captain on him, and it's double whammy in terms of points. It's like what Late Riser talks about, upside chasing. I thought, I'm just going to have a little play at this, and yeah, it paid off. So see how the season goes. It's still very early, but definitely can't complain. I've never seen these sort of like high ranks before in my life, and few have after sort of about 14 to 15 years of playing the game. So yeah. It's mad.
I think the first year that we podded together, you definitely had like a bit of a moment before, to put it in your words, you pooed the bed when you were kind of in the top 10k, and even that was kind of a cause for celebration. But yeah, as you say, these are astronomical numbers. Like, you're top of the actual Who Got This mini league, which has never happened before. And it is just, we'll definitely dig into this in just a bit. Things like kind of the decision making and how you play now as well are definitely going to be things that people are going to want to hear about, because it definitely becomes a bit more of an interesting sort of situation for you, doesn't it? Should we move on and part that for a second? We'll get back into that as the main topic. I think you're next, Sam, actually.
Yeah, so I'll go next. It's not as fun a story as Nick's at the moment. I'm not quite getting the big captaincy hauls. I chickened out a little bit of Saka this week as well, so I went with Haaland, got the blank there. But overall, the team carried me a little bit better. There was a bit more depth there points wise, so 56 overall was enough for a 570k rank jump, which more indicates how poorly my season's been going thus far, rather than anything extremely good this week. So yeah, it was a nice little rank jump. I'm nestled at about 1.4 1.5 million right now, which is okay for now. I wouldn't be panicking at this moment in time. Trent got the 8-pointer, so that's 5 clean sheets and 1 assist in 7 game weeks so far for Trent. Lewis with the assist, and Mbumo getting the goal, the penalty, and Solanke only getting the assist. Overall, not too bad. Kind of regret not looking more closely at Saka. I did explain my reasoning on Haaland, or the reason I would probably be going with Haaland on the last pod. And all of that still stands. But looking back, I didn't really consider outside factors like De Bruyne probably still being out, Rodri obviously causing build-up issues, and possibly there was more of an opportunity there than I gave credence to, I gave credit to. So yeah, maybe that's something to learn next time. But overall, Green Arrow, 56 points, and hopefully, because I'm still ranked at 1.4 1.5 million, there's a few more Green Arrows to come yet.
Yeah, I'm sure, definitely. That's one of the big brain moments, I guess, the big brain positives of going down that far, Sam.
All
you're going to get loads
of
lovely green arrows, and you're going to be really happy for a while. Tap that ahead. Yep. Okay. And me finally. I was actually genuine. I was out, family, friends, middle of nowhere, no signal at all. So kind of it all kind of came to me in like a bit of in one sort of fell swoop, really, about what had happened on Saturday. With the Haaland blank, and then what happened with Saka as well. And I was initially, when I kind of saw that who had scored and things on SofaScore, I was initially thinking, oh my goodness, I've been absolutely decimated this week. This is awful. because I'd assumed that Saka was going to have a really high, effective ownership. I'd assumed that, I was going to be killed by that, but the 16 points is actually really good because it came as being like I'm up to 271k now for 58 points, and I assumed that would be like 100%, like tipping 100. He wasn't at all, 40%, and that was actually really beneficial. But it was still kind of I said in the pod last week that I was kind of. I had it bust on Saka. I was between him and Haaland, and I'm not blaming you, Sam, but you definitely made a few really good points about Haaland, and it is what it is at the end of the day. And as we always say, when the deadline hits, the chips are down. There's nothing you can do about it, and it's just one of those where you're kind of like, maybe. But I mean, it's one of those as well that I put to bed very quickly in my head these days. I don't really kind of worry about them that much. So yeah, 58. Lewis with the assist, same as you guys. Alexander-Arnold with that clean sheet and a 2 bonus, same as you guys. Bumo with the goal, who's just a regulation pick now. And I'm sure, Nick, when we come to your team at the very end of the pods, you'll be telling us you'll be buying him in immediately. One big thing for me this week was Diaz we found out from the leakers last minute that he was looking like he's going to be benched. Mikalenko, there were rumours that he was also injured, and it turned out to be the case. And I obviously had the perennial question mark over Rico Lewis starting or not. So I was just like, well, okay, there's a risk I'm going to play 10 men here. I wasn't to know, of course, that Stewart, for some reason, was going to start for Southampton. Did go off Crocs, but hey, that was good. But anyway, so I was just like, well, I might have 10 men here. So I did Diaz to Johnson at the very last minute. And one of those players that featured very highly pre-season, if you remember, Sam, in that long kind of fun zone mid homebrew I did. I've been kind of producing the numbers in terms of expected goals, and yeah, probably could have scored 2, if not 3. Werner's cross in the first minute probably should have gone in, but yeah, obviously really, really nice to see the goal going in at like 4.8% ownership, and that kind of helped me a little bit this week. And I suppose that was kind of, you had a good moment there as well because Slanky assisted him. So up to 58. It made a lot of sense for me to buy Johnson. Just to explain that a bit further, just because I've got Watkins. I'm going to probably keep Watkins, but Villa did look a little bit anemic versus United. It sounds like there's a bit of a mental block about Villa playing United by the sounds of Villa fans discussing that fixture and how it's gone in the past. Dan Bardell on Cardiff Football Weekly was saying that they've got a real sort of problem playing United. But anyway, the Johnson goal basically, I think, just kind of consolidated the Green Arrows. So yeah, all good. I think it's kind of an okay start. Obviously, nothing like yours, Nick, but still, I can kind of make peace with it for now and see what happens going forward. I've only got 1 free transfer, so it keeps rolling on that I keep having to make 1 move every single week. Cool. All right. So main topic this week, to move us on to that, is levels of engagement. And I think this is really interesting just to kind of go into here, because Nick mentions at the very top that is kind of enjoying FPL content creator retirement to some extent. And I know that your kind of level of engagement is much lower than it used to be. Not in a bad way. It's understandable because you've got loads of other things which are going on, Nick. But I mean, in terms of the thought process and things that you've done so far this year, so taking Pont and Palmer in 7, Saka this week, only 5% of managers, I'm sure I saw somewhere, capped that way. I mean, mentioned we for many years we spoke about fear of missing out and all that sort of thing. I mean, do you think that because you're kind of slightly less kind of online now and you're kind of less sort of ingratiated with the FPL community and kind of what's going on in the zeitgeist, do you think that kind of has a positive impact in the decisions you've made this year?
I think it's tough to say. The season actually started out pretty strangely, if I'm honest. Like I started the season not particularly engaged with FPL or even football. I just spent the summer kind of really busy with family and work, and I actually also got really heavily into the Olympics and the Paralympics, and I thought both of them were like both amazing spectacles, and I got really engrossed in just watching all these different interesting sports. Of course, we also had the Euros, and that, for an England fan, that was incredibly draining. It was the kind of the same experience we've experienced many times before, but again, like the last couple of times, we've just got so close to the actual possibility of winning a trophy and it all kind of falling flat again. And just that whole experience, I just found that quite draining. So I actually kind of went into the start of the season thinking, you know what, I'm just going to have a year off. I'll just do what I want when I want, and there's no one looking at me or caring what I do anyway, so who cares? So I started off, picked my team, and it was pretty poor. pretty poor start the first couple of weeks. Actually, I had a few fires. In Nkunku, he was a poor pick, but perhaps one that many went for. Garnacho, probably an own goal in my own making, going for a guy like that. He wasn't nailed on, for instance, and it was United. So that was a mistake of my own. And then I had Solanke, who was crooked, and Barco, who left immediately. So I had loads of problems. The team was unbalanced with both Salah and Haaland. So that's why I wildcarded in 3. I was like, as you heard from my voice note, I did a few weeks back where I just said, you know what, I've never wildcarded this early before. Time to just shift everyone out, get a bit more balanced, and just brought in a bunch of guys like Diaz, who I thought, he might be able to cover Salah, and found a way to get in Haaland, but also Palmer, Watkins, and Saka. That's 4 heavy hitters, and Diaz, and there's actually 5 heavy hitters. I just fit them all in and see what happens. And after that, it's just, things just exploded for me, and it's just been ridiculous. And yeah, maybe to a certain extent, like not really listening to anyone's advice, just doing my own thing, playing my own games, as people like to say, kind of really did pay off. I didn't listen to like any kind of influencers or kind of base my decisions on any algos or anything. I just looked at the kind of what was happening and the players and my own knowledge of them, and a bit of grass FC knowledge, I suppose, as opposed to analytics FC. But yeah, just base my wildcard a little bit on that. And it's very, very early wildcards. Normally, I'm like at least 6. Every time I played in the past, I've said I'm not wildcarding early. There's no value to it. But wildcarding in 3 has paid off massively, and also, and even in terms of not just points, but also overall value of my team. Like my team value is like 102.8 million now, and I was comparing it to other people in the mini league, and I was actually, you know what, I'm like, I've got about 1.5 million in terms of overall value compared to other people in the leagues and stuff. So maybe that paid off in terms of the early wildcard, as well as just nailing the captain picks. But yeah, I think to a certain extent, just doing my own thing and not listening to the masses has helped me kind of break free. It could have easily gone the other way, but this time round it's paid off, and it's definitely good.
I love that. And I think one point that you touched on there that I'd like to ask you a little bit more about is the gut thing. And I can never remember which book I first read this in, but there's a lot of scientific study behind trusting your gut. And I think the more experienced you are on a subject, i.e. FPL in this case, and you've got many, many years of playing it and obviously discussing it at length with Tom here, I think your gut becomes so well informed that even subconsciously you start making the correct judgments just based on your knowledge of the game, which is so deep at this point. And is there therefore possibly an argument that even when taking a step back now, your gut is this strong that you can kind of take away all of the noise that you might see on Twitter? You can take away all of the different noise from 1,000,001 different content creators which there are these days, and all of the prevailing winds online, and just trust your gut a little bit more, knowing that actually I've built up a really good base of football knowledge over the years, and I'm going to back myself to know better than the average, hate using the word expert, but content creator, let's say instead, online, and try and get an edge in that way. What would you say to that?
I mean, it's hard to answer. I don't want to paint myself as some sort of FPL savant that just kind of knew in the back of my mind.
Expert, you're an expert.
Yeah.
You said it.
Better than the experts. Just knew in the back of my mind this was the right decision. Blank out all the noise. I've got some sort of like algorithm in my brain that's kind of operating at a higher level than all the kind of algos that people have built. Like I know that I do recognise, there's an element of luck to it all, but like, just a bit of football knowledge. As you said, I played this game 14 years now, and just like, I think like quite a lot of the time, like the algos look too far in the past, and that's my own personal opinion. Like all the focus on Bruno and things like that, when actually like a player like Morgan Rogers, like the algos wouldn't recognise this guy because he's never done anything ever in FPL, but like just hearing about him, reading about him, seeing him perform, obviously he's 5 million, so he's a bit of an anomaly anyway, but I just knew this was like a guy I was like, I'm getting in my team. Palmer, he only had really a season's worth of data, but I still kind of recognised that he was going to be the linchpin of Chelsea and the key man, so recognised that. I thought, he's going to do well. And Diaz as well, I always kind of saw him as like a player I was like, he's, perhaps Salah's like future, maybe. Salah's obviously got about 1 year left, maybe at Liverpool, and Diaz was kind of like when he was kind of like on the opposite flank and really kind of stepping up his performances at the end of the season. So I was like, actually, I think this guy might be able to press on this season, and that's kind of where I based a few of my decisions. And Watkins as well. Watkins is another player that I thought was amazing last season. And he did really well in the Euros when he got minutes. Same with Palmer. And I just thought, I'm just gonna pump for these guys. I think like they're undervalued, and I think the ownership was really low as well in Gameweek 3, and they had some decent fixtures, so I just went for them.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Because I think obviously just as a product of doing this, we kind of look at all the possibilities and we go fairly deep on the different manifestations of, okay, like me and Sam both had like a fairly strong idea that we were going to wildcard in game week 6. And I think that it's not kind of quite sunk cost, because I think it's fair to say both our teams are doing okay up, and then it kind of got to a kind of a natural point of conclusion. And there wasn't really any sort of feeling in game week before game week 3 that we were going to hit the wild card around then. But it must be kind of quite liberating in some ways as well to not be kind of, I guess, deep in the trenches down the rabbit holes with it, because I think that touching on kind of some pitfalls potentially of being really super engaged with FPL, which is something which is kind of a bit of a necessity if you are a content creator, but also I think just if you do genuinely love the game. And obviously, I know you've got loads of stuff going on, Nick, and I hear what you say about having a bit of a year off and just doing what you want to do. I think that can, I guess, be quite freeing in a lot of ways to not be susceptible to that FOMO I spoke about, and try new things. And I know that James from Planet FPL was listening to the start of that when I was putting my daughter to bed earlier on. He gave you a shout out as well, by the way. But yeah, he's doing really well as well for just kind of playing his own game. And we spoke about last week with Sam and I that this year is kind of it's just genuinely quite a FOMO inducing year. Like, I don't know, does it feel quite freeing to not have to? I not have to, but not have that sort of additional bit of noise, as Sam put it, surrounding your decisions. And does that help you?
Well, yeah, I do think it is freeing. I think when no one's kind of really caring what you do, you definitely just kind of just play your own game, as I said. Of course, that's probably changed now. So now I've advertised myself to a certain extent, and how well I'm doing. There's going to be a bit more attention, a bit more scrutiny in terms of how I'm getting on. So hopefully I can kind of just maintain that mindset in my head and just kind of not feel the pressure of, oh, if I make this mistake, I'm going to be scrutinized or I'm going to be criticized. Not that the community are really like that, to be honest, but you do feel like a bit more pressure in terms of like people observing what you do. But yeah, I think there's a few people out there, and I think just not following, I suppose, I said this a bit earlier, but not following kind of exactly what other content creators are doing, what the algos are saying. People have taken risks this season. James at Planet FPL, he took a wild card. He didn't get Haaland, he didn't get Salah in it, and he's done excellently as well. There's a few people, even like Andy Martin, who can be quite divisive. He's managed to go no Haaland and get himself up to 100k. So many ways of playing the game. If a lot of the algos say bring in Bruno and bring in Eze, and that's not worked out for many people, or even when it does work out, there's so many people doing exactly the same thing that it's not going to propel you in the same way. But at least at the start of this season, and obviously things will change as the season goes on, playing a bit differently has worked out well for people like myself. But it's very early in the season. We have to be honest. It's only game week 8 or whatever. So.
Yeah. We can't stop the count.
30 weeks later, I'll be down back in the doldrums.
Finish the season now.
Yeah, just stop the count is all. Stop the count.
So one question I wanted to ask you, Nick, as well, which again, I'm making assumptions based on how you've been talking so far, but I'd love to hear it from you. How are you weighing up fixtures versus like player ability and form these days? It feels like it's much more leaning towards backing the player almost regardless of the fixtures, or at least aside from captaincy, perhaps. You mentioned Saka, but backing Palmer, backing Watkins, backing Rodgers, knowing that he was a hot prospect. Are these picks more weighted towards the quality of the player now rather than trying to chase the upside on specific fixture patches, or what balance are you trying to strike at the moment?
To a certain extent, I've always leaned towards form rather than fixture, but I think certainly when it comes to my captain picks, I've picked players with decent fixtures. I think it probably, when once we get to it, let's segue quite well into our sort of conversations around the Manchester City players, for instance, versus keeping someone like Palmer, because that's one of the things I've looked at, and one of the decisions I was going to make was, do I sell Palmer for Foden? It's like, no, I'm not going to. Palmer, spoiler alert, Palmer is in form. Foden hasn't got running yet. So I think it really does. If a player's in form, and I captained Haaland against Arsenal because he'd just been on a brilliant run up to that point, and now after after sort of Rodri got injured and Haaland kind of got a bit worked up at the end of the game, I just started to wonder if he was getting a bit too worked up, and then I kind of went for a bit of a different punt and looked at Palmer's fixture and Palmer's form and went for him instead. So I think you always have to look at both fixtures and form. There's no kind of one-sided answer, fixtures or form. It just depends on kind of week by week and just basing it based on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do think it's interesting that, like, just to contrast you and Nick and James from Planet, like, you're, as you said, mostly backing form, even though obviously you do recognise that there has to be a bit of an integrational sort of outlook on it. And James is just hardcore fixtures, as we know, the whole time. And I think it's something that we've kind of both said kind of over the last kind of couple of years, Sam, but this is something that we've been crying out for, really, that in the past few years, I think exacerbated particularly by last year, pick all your favourites sort of thing. This is kind of the FPL we want to see. Obviously, with Nick as a close friend and James as one of my mates, it's good to see them doing really well. But equally, I think it's very good that you've got these sorts of possibilities, and those possibilities seem a lot more viable now to play differently, rather than in the past you played that way and it just felt like you were kind of on a hiding to nothing, right?
Yeah, in previous seasons, especially last year in isolation, that it seemed like there was only one route for success. This season already, we've seen across even just Nick and James as two good examples, but we mentioned Andy Martin a minute ago as well. There's plenty of other examples of very different setups and different strategies that are all paying dividends at the moment. And it's really exciting for FPL. It's obviously not exciting for my rank just yet, but I'm looking forward to the opportunities that brings over the next 30 game weeks. And the fact that there's always going to be a player that no one is going to be on, a big player as well, that if you can get on it early, then you can steal a march on them. And Nick's already done that with Palmer. I hope to do that with a player someday soon, fingers crossed. And Tom, of course, you're flying pretty high at 271k already as well. So there's plenty of time left. There's plenty of very differential, big hitting players that are going to be up for grabs, no matter which strategy you play. And there's going to be a lot of managers that just aren't going to get there.
Yeah, no, completely. I think just to round off the section, a sort of mini Nick interview, I think that there has to be something about play style here, because obviously you've got to where you are, Nick, by making calls which are perhaps against the grain. Reason calls, as they're not kind of, we used James Justin's example last week, and this week again, double-digit haul, assist and 2 bones, I think it was. But you're in and around the top 1K and top 500, indeed. What's your plan to stay there? Is it inevitable you'll become less bold to try to consolidate that sort of high finish, or are you planning to continue to try to win it all?
It's a tricky one to answer. I think even last week, if you asked me, I would have said, I'm going to try and consolidate. But then I changed my mind last minute and thought, actually, I'm going to shoot for the moon with a Saka captaincy. And if I'd have captained Haaland, I'd have fallen in rank quite significantly this week. So I think even when you attempt to consolidate, sometimes it doesn't pay off. But still, this week, I'm looking to probably just go with the herd and captain Haaland. I'm not going to, try and tear up any trays at least this game week. But when the opportunity next arises, I will be looking for another cheeky punt or a cheeky differential to try and see if I can push myself even higher. Because ultimately, the way I view it, you've only got one shot at ever winning this game, and I've got as much of a shot this time than I'll ever have in my lifetime. So I don't want to throw it away by being too boring, and kind of bring back the dullard in me, as you like to refer to me as every so often. So I could try and see maybe the bigger the back, and just centre backs with big skulls will come back at some point. But
are you saying buy Reece James?
What's that?
Are you saying buy Reece James and bring it back to 3-4 years ago, big at the back?
Well, maybe if he's fit.
God, never. I mean, is there a paradox in that almost, that you might actually become more engaged now? Or are you kind of thinking, well, it's got me here to play how I'm playing, so I'm just going to kind of stick at it, make logical calls, but as you say, find a cheeky punt here and there?
Well, I've never been disengaged really anyway. I've always kind of been lurking in the background, just following what's happening, and just not perhaps interacting with people too much. It's just kind of like mostly just engaging with our local Slack community, and no one put the Diaz leak in there, so I completely missed that one this week. So I think if I want to do well, I have to have some level of engagement. But I think there's a fine line between like being engaged and spending hours every day just listening to various podcasts and trawling through Twitter for tidbits. I think it's you're pointing at yourself there, but I think it's a game which you probably only really need to dedicate a few hours a week to, and you can be very, very successful.
I think it's a case of, sorry, go on.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, I think it's a case of diminishing returns with how much information you can take in with FPL. And I did point at myself, because I'm definitely someone who does this, but I spend hours and hours and hours going through absolutely all the pods, all of the data, everything. And I think you can probably eyeball it and get it 99% of the way there with maybe a fraction of the information that people like myself might be taking in. And the amount of times I've ended up going in a bit of a circle and not knowing which way is up by the end of the game week, because I've just taken in so many conflicting different bits of advice and bits of information that eventually will of course conflict with each other, that I just don't know which way to go. So possibly, yeah, it's a case of diminishing returns, and just knowing that engagement to a certain level, of course, is good. You don't want to miss a leak. You don't want to miss some crucial injury news. But after that, once you know what you want to do in your gut, then maybe you can take a step back and just say, I don't need to listen to any more content this week. But do listen to WGTA.
Yeah, obviously listen to us at the start of the
Don't
week.
turn us off now. It's like,
yeah.
Had enough.
It's all done.
Listen to these guys. They say stop listening to content.
All the viewers have disappeared now. I completely agree with what you're saying there, Sam. And I think that I think we're all at different stages. Like for me, I think I'm more in a consolidation where I've got a few kind of sources I listen to every week. A few I like Fred's Day on Twitter on I think it's like Thursday or Friday, when all the threads come out. I don't necessarily agree with them all, but I think they're always quite fun to read. I listen to a few podcasts. I also mentioned Planet, and there's a few others I'll listen to every week. But that's pretty much it. And then there's stuff where I get to a point where I know through, Nick have been playing for so many years, where I'll just kind of be like, I don't need to hear anymore now, but that took a long time. The first few years of 5 years of Who Got the Assist, I was so, in it and trying to be really a massive part of the community, as far as I possibly could, and try to listen to everything, just try to be part of the discourse, part of the discussion. I think I just modeled my brain more than anything, that I was unable to kind of just be like, okay, this is what I want to do, because I was just thinking, oh, this guy said this, well, I really like that. Dave said that, oh, I really like that. And it's just kind of trying to find the formula that works for you, I suppose, today. Nick, final question before we move on to the next bit. How does it feel generally? I mean, I think people want to know, how do you feel being in the top 1K? And as you say, it's something that it's taken you 15 years to get there. And you're no Fabio Borge. I think it's probably fair to say. I mean, how does it feel to be in the top 1K or top 500 right now?
I mean, yeah, it feels great. I think, last week I was like, well, that's it. It's all going to be downhill from here. And then this week again, it's just like another green arrow. And yeah, of course, like playing this game for 15 years, it is quite exhilarating, but you kind of know in the back of your mind that like things are going to fall apart. So you're just waiting for like things to kind of hit the fan. I think we'll see how I feel at the end of game week 38, but certainly, enjoying the game so far, getting back into it, just loving it all. So yeah, can't complain at all.
Just
Happy
don't
with it.
Yeah, there'll be a Spursy moment, won't there, Nick? No, I'm sure there won't
Yeah.
be. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for that. Let's move on to the next bit. I think as part of this, we're going to turn our attention to the next block of 4 fixtures before the final international break 2024, which is coming up at the end of game week 11, I'm going to say. I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's right. So next week, we'll take a really in-depth look at the key assets from all teams as far as we can, we think, unless there's some sort of big injury. If Haaland is injured or something, I think that's going to completely kind of just override everything we're looking at. But I think here for the rest of this pod, and especially with different ownership situations and different ways of approaching the game, we thought it might be a good idea to just focus on some of the key men in the zeitgeist, the big 4, Palmer, Saka, Haaland and Salah, and a few of the sort of the beta picks which kind of surround that. So, like with Palmer, someone like Jackson, perhaps with Saka, Havertz, with Haaland, Foden, with Salah, Diaz, maybe Trent, and also maybe throwing a bit of Watkins as well, just to see, I think, over the next 4 fixtures, exactly how we're going to be looking at these guys. Because, as we mentioned in pods ad nauseam, there's definitely an opportunity this year to be sticking with these players, investing with them, or twisting them out as and when things suit. So the big 4, as I mentioned, Palmer, Saka, Haaland and Salah. I think Palmer, Nick, you said to me kind of the other day that you're looking at, despite all he's done for you, you're looking at potentially twisting him out very soon. The next 4 are Liverpool, Newcastle, Man United and Arsenal. So not the best run over the next 4. Game week 12 onwards, I think everyone will be buying Palmer. But what if he's new Salah, Nick? I mean, you could just leave him there. I mean, what are your thoughts behind potentially keeping him or potentially getting rid?
Well, at the moment, I'm actually leaning towards keeping him, I think. So there was a little bit of a plan in the back of my mind to swap him for Foden, and it was really to do with the fixtures, as I kind of spoke about a little bit earlier. Like Palmer's fixtures, Liverpool, Newcastle, Man United, Arsenal, essentially all within the original kind of the big 8, as they might be referred to. So they're all kind of tough fixtures, and then Foden had Wolves and Southampton up next, like probably the 2 weakest defensively teams in the Premier League right now. So it kind of felt like a bit of a no-brainer to just do the swap. I think, and I would do it if Foden was actually showing any kind of form at the moment, but the guy has only started 1 game so far, and he's got an XG over the course of the season of 0.23. In comparison, his teammate Lewis has 0.72. So, I've already got Lewis, and I'm probably going to captain Haaland. So, do I really need Foden? There's no Rodri, there's no De Bruyne. Foden, I wouldn't even trust him to start. Probably, I'd probably say even someone like Doku might even be a better pick right now than Foden if you want to punt on a Manchester City midfielder, and he's certainly a lot cheaper. And obviously Palmer's on penalties as well, which is really important. So even if like he's got tougher fixtures, it just takes 1 foul in the box and Palmer gets a goal, and with the new bonus point changes as well, that would probably come with 3 bonus points, and that's virtually talking about 10 points for doing nothing.
He got 2, didn't he? He got 2 despite a yellow card, didn't he, this weekend? Well, admittedly,
he got 1, but
played very well. He got 2. He got 2.
Did he?
Yeah, he ended up with 2. Yeah, he got 6 because he got an assist, but yellow card, but also got 6 points. Yeah. I mean, Sam, we've said a few times that Nick's kind of reflects on it, that there's that sort of kind of Salah-ish tendency surrounding Palmer, and we kind of both discussed potentially some sort of manifestation of just being like, screw it, I'm going to need to cover this guy.
Yeah.
But those next 4 could be off-putting, and maybe we're kind of being guilty of again being a bit hindsighty, because last week we were kind of thinking, we need to find a way of getting there. Well, at least I was, and now I'm kind of okay. He's only got 6 points. It's fine. It's okay, but there's, even though they've got the tricky next 6, I do think there's going to be, you every week you're going to be kind of looking at him and thinking, Christ, I really hope one of the other guys that I own is going to be able to step up and cover that.
Yeah, I think there's an element now with Palmer of inevitability that we just haven't seen with too many FPL assets out there over the years. You're looking at the Haalands, the Salahs of the world. Palmer is stepping up into that category now of every single week, no matter who the opponent. If Chelsea score, you know who is going to be like involved in that goal, and it's almost always now Palmer. He's that central to what they're doing, and yes, he only returned an assist. Obviously, we've spoken about the bonus points, but he was so close to getting more, and it just felt so dangerous at all moments of that game. And every time I switched across to check the Chelsea score, I was like, oh, please don't let Palmer have scored again. Like it just feels so inevitable with him at the moment. And even with the fixtures, 2 of the next 4, I would say, are difficult. Liverpool away, Arsenal at home, 2 good defences there. But Newcastle and Man United in between. Newcastle don't historically travel that well, so at home for Chelsea, not a bad fixture. And Man United away, it's Man United. I'm not that worried about that at the moment, although they have kept 4 clean sheets so far, so maybe I'm being a little bit blasé there. But I think once that Liverpool fixture's out the way, the run, I can always let off one bad game week in there, but Newcastle, Man United, Arsenal, then into Leicester, Villa, Southampton, Tottenham, as a stretch, it's good. And Palmer just feels so inevitable that I am, in the back of my mind, trying to make a plan for how I'm going to get to him quicker than game week 12. Because whilst that's when the obvious good fixtures come in, I think he is going to score points between now and then. And some of the other players at his price point, Saka, just taking an example here, goes out of Bournemouth this week into Liverpool, Newcastle, Chelsea, which isn't much better, really. And he's less central to what Arsenal are doing. As good as he's been, and obviously he's been fantastic, I would say that Palmer is the bigger goal threat at the moment. And I think out of the 2, if they had the exact same fixtures at the exact same time, obviously impossible, but I would probably pick Palmer in a straight head-to-head. Very marginally, of course, and obviously he's a little bit more expensive, but yeah, that's the way I feel at the moment. And I am wondering if just trying to have a plan to get him in before game week 12 is worth it.
Yeah, no, I'm exactly the same. It's top for non-pen SGI at the moment, and not unsurprisingly, probably for everybody out there. And it feels like if we did have the wild cards again, even now, I feel like you'd be looking at a freemium, wouldn't you? Really, you'd be looking at a Saka, Haaland, and Palmer. Or Saka's obviously questionable. We'll speak about him in a minute. And it does that feeling of inevitability about a certain player, like the very, very the apex of talismanship is something that we're always prizing in FPL. And that looming ownership as well is something which probably is something that we're going to have to be contending with every week, as I mentioned. And you will be hoping that everybody else that you've got in play is going to cover those points, and you're kind of just praying for a blank. But Chelsea seems to have it down, Nick, at the moment. Like, it seems to be quite settled, and like the no conference league as well is such a positive thing for him too, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I was saying to you the other day about Maresca versus Pochettino, and it just feels like Maresca just knows who his starting 11 is, and I think that's really benefiting Chelsea this season. Like, for instance, like every game week, we basically could have predicted who would have played, and we would never have been able to do that with Poch, like week in, week out. We could have said maybe Palmer would start, but who would start with him? We would have no idea. And at least this season, they've got a lot of players that can come off the bench, but at least at the moment, he's starting Sancho, Palmer, Madueke, and Nico Jackson as the front 4, and he's got Caicedo and Enzo in midfield if they're fit, and that's the starting 6 and the best 6, and obviously like some Neto and Felix and Nkunku like are benches that any other club could dream of, but at least so far this season it seems to be working for Maresca. He's got his Premier League team, and then he's got his Cup team and his Europa Conference League or whatever they're in team as well, and Palmer was just central to the plans, and he's definitely that key man. Everything seems to be flowing through him, and he's just undroppable for them. So in terms of minutes, he's not a concern in the slightest. And Yeah, I think, the more I think about it, I'm not going to be selling him. I've got other buyers to sort out in midfield with Diaz and Semenyo. So I think Palmer will stay through this tougher fixture rather than I was, because I was, even if I did sell him, it would kind of be more of a boomerang type situation where I sell him for a couple and bring him back in. But I think I'd rather just save the transfer and see if he can get anything in the next couple, maybe.
Yeah, 3 yellow cards as well for Palmer, not that actually matters.
That's not a problem.
And
even when they were fighting, he sat on the ground and had a
nice little that was great.
Literally, I was about to say, what's different about Palmer is that he recognised that, like, if he was like, okay, I'm just going to chill out here, and that was just very, very cold of him indeed. What's really interesting is about Chelsea, Sam, as well, is that you've got Nicholas Jackson, who is level actually with Haaland at the moment for non-pen XGI, and not very far beneath him in terms of non-pen XG as well. So really, really close, and actual XG people do care about that. Again, second to Haaland. But likes of him, maybe Noni Madueke as well. I think had a lot. He had a lot of shots, didn't he, this weekend? But it feels like it's Palmer or nothing a little bit from Chelsea. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do to an extent. I think the key point here that I wanted to mention is that with all of the other big hitters, there does seem like an able deputy that you could probably go to, other than maybe Haaland with Foden at the moment until he's back and fully fit. Whereas with Palmer, it seems like visibly a bigger drop off in terms of what you're actually expecting to get from the players. Jackson seems like the closest at the moment, as you mentioned. Obviously, the data's looking good. I still feel like there are better alternatives around his price point up front that would put me off of him a little bit. And I don't know if anything is going to come of this, but any eagle-eyed people out there would have seen him visibly slap one of the Nottingham Forest players at the end of the match when he was on the bench. So I do wonder if there's going to be a pending ban coming for him anyway, which actually could ironically bring Nkunku back into the reckoning for a couple of game weeks. So just keep an eye on that. I wouldn't be recommending him just yet. I've already been burnt by that. But just want to note, and I think, with Palmer, the drop-off seems too severe for me. Madueke, Sancho, even Jackson, I think are all able to get dropped a lot quicker and rotated a lot quicker than Palmer is, obviously. And they've got such talent in all of those positions that it only takes 1 or 2 bad game weeks or bad performances from them, and they could easily get rotated out. So I'd always be a little bit nervous with any of those players, barring Palmer.
Yeah, I mean, Kunku's obviously fallen the most of any player this season. Who's down to 6 now. One of those that, if the situation develops that Jackson's injured, then suddenly, hey, you know what, we've got an alternative on our hands. But it doesn't really seem to be the case, really, for him. Maybe moving on to Saka, there could be a bit of a argument that we've got Havertz for him as well. Yeah. He's performing very well. And there's definitely potentially a bit of a plan for some to drop after Bournemouth. So you've got Bournemouth up next, and then there's Liverpool at home, Newcastle away, and Chelsea away. And then I think then again the good fixtures return, akin to Palmer. It just doesn't. I don't know. I think there's definitely an abiding sort of, I don't call it narrative. There's an abiding sort of thought process that, apart from game week 1, we just had kind of assists mostly for Gabriel's head to nod in about Saka, and there was a feeling that maybe he's just kind of changed to be a bit more of a playmaker and all this sort of thing. Obviously, rudely sort of dispelled potentially against, admittedly, sorry Sam, quite a feeble defence in Southampton. I mean, it's one of those where, yes, there's obviously this capacity to hop around the premiums at Liverpool, Newcastle, Chelsea. I look at that and think, well, there's no Man City in there, and I'm not particularly worried, Nick. I mean, how do you view this?
Yeah, I think it's similar to Palmer. He is the talisman. He's not the Riker at Arsenal. I know he started a little bit slowly, just getting assists. But he was still picking up quite a few assists. And then this week he came out with a goal as well, only his second goal of the season, but that takes him to 2 goals, 7 assists. And obviously I'm going to be keeping him for Bournemouth, but similar to Palmer, if Foden blows up against Wolves and then he's got Southampton at home, at that point I might be tempted to make the swap very easily. So it just depends. But when I look at kind of selling Saka, I'm like, who are the alternatives? Who's the kind of who's available, who's out there? Son is injured. There's a couple other guys maybe at Spurs that might be kind of getting on the radar. Jared Bowen, people like that are always around. But, like at the moment, if there's no alternative to Saka and I'm happy with what he's doing, then again, I might well hold him. But at this moment in time, I'm not seeing anyone that's really kind of attracting my attention and thinking I'm going to be selling Saka after next week for the trickier fixtures. So I think it's a watch and wait with him. See how he gets on in Bournemouth. If he gets another attacking return, another goal, then I'll probably hold him. If he blanks and someone really kind of attracts my attention, then maybe I will sell him. But at this moment in time, he definitely feels like a hold for me, especially after last week's performance.
No, I agree. I think you'll agree, Sam, too. I mean, I think just to turn it to elsewhere, I mentioned Havertz, who probably, in retrospect, if we kind of had not had that hotel walkabout for Raya, we may have ended up there. And obviously he scored 2 and 2, etc., so on and so on. How are you feeling about the double defense sort of setup at the moment? Like, I just kind of feel like we went there for a reason, independently, but we went there for a reason, which was just that there was longevity in doing that. But the last 2 fixtures have been games that we were just thinking, yeah, they're going to basically poo points here, and we've got like 2 clean sheets basically just done, and suddenly here we are feeling a little bit sorry for ourselves potentially about that situation. Are you looking at keeping them despite the next few fixtures not looking particularly rosy?
Yeah, I think there's just an element of them's the breaks in FPL. Sometimes you just don't get that haul that you're expecting off of your defenders. It's quite hard to predict, and watching both of those matches quite closely. One I watched live, the Leicester game, and then the Southampton one, for obvious reasons, I was keeping a very close eye on as well. I feel very, very unfortunate not to have gotten away with or came away with at least 1 clean sheet for both of them out of those 2 fixtures. The Leicester one we spoke about last weekend. It's one of those weeks where there's a thunderbolt strike from Justin. There's one that was deflected off of Havertz's head, off of Havertz's shoulder, I think it was technically, to give Raya the misstep. And on another day, that could have easily been a clean sheet. And against Southampton, again, pretty unfortunate to have conceded. I think what hasn't been spoken about is the fact that Archer's shot actually had a very small deflection off of Saliba that nursed it into the corner out of Raya's grasp. So again, little bit unfortunate. These things do happen. And when you've got a double defense of any team, you obviously feel the pain of these like high variance outcomes a lot more. And therefore you're more tempted to jump away from them when you do start feeling that pain. But over the course of the season, I still fully expect Arsenal to be the best defence, if not top 2. Liverpool also look pretty capable now, but they're going to be absolutely fine. The next 3 fixtures after Bournemouth don't look great, but the one to be fair, the 2 I'm scared about are Liverpool and Chelsea. Outside of that, it's a great run all the way through to 18. And I think in 2 or 3 game weeks time, I'd probably just want to buy one of them back again anyway. Yeah. And given the ability of the defense, I just don't really want to do a hokey cokey with them when there are precious transfers to be used elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, Nick, remembering back in the day, like there's no sort of Nick Pope, Tom Heaton sort of character standing out in the cheap seats. I mean, maybe kind of Nottingham Forest are 4th at the moment for XGC, so maybe like Matt Sells would be a candidate, or maybe your hero Emi Martinez from a few years back. But I mean, it doesn't feel quite like it's the time, if you got double Arsenal defence, so there's much value perhaps in jumping off them. I mean, what do you say to that?
Yeah, I'd probably stick with a double Arsenal. I mean, I've only got the single Arsenal. I was looking at Saliba and maybe even going for like a sort of a double defence with Gabriel and Saliba, just because of the attacking threat that they both pose. Obviously, he's scored a couple of goals so far. I'm waiting for Saliba to do something similar, but unfortunately for me, I couldn't stretch the budget for that, and I ultimately ended up with a cheap goalkeeper. That's why I quite like Robert Sanchez, because I got him in at 4.5, and Chelsea also look quite improved at the back. They picked up a few clean sheets. So I think the likes of Sanchez and Nana at Manchester United's done pretty well as well, or a few people at Pickford or Henderson, people like that. I mean, ultimately, I think whoever your goalkeeper is, unless you're wild carding, just stick with them and just roll through the fixtures. It's never really, as far as I'm concerned, a critical change to make. So certainly, if you do have the Arsenal double defense and you're a bit annoyed from the last couple of game weeks, just stick through the tougher fixtures, because I think they'll be getting plenty of clean sheets over the course of the season. And Raya as well. He's picked up quite a few save points here and there as well, so he's been doing well.
Yeah, I think if someone like kind of Flecken or something like that like came to the fore and Brentford suddenly tightened up, then suddenly you've got a question if you're looking to buy a Palmer or something. You need that extra million from somewhere. If you've got 2 or 3 free, I think you've got 3 free transfer, haven't you, Sam? So maybe that would be a situation you might get into. So yeah, no, that's cool. Haaland, the next sort of member of the big four. Wolves, Southampton, Bournemouth, and Brighton next 4. And the Southampton games at home could be a potential triple captain shout for those who didn't use it against Ipswich. Mark Southerns tweeted he'd only blanked 4 times back-to-back in Man City career, and he never blanked 3 times in a row. Sam, are we worried yet? Is this a blip, or is it the start of a terminal decline? Is Andy Martin, who Nick mentioned earlier on, we love Andy, but is he right that Erling Haaland is an absolute trash pick? I'm joking.
Yeah, I know. There's a difference in question here. So, like, whether or not he's a good pick for value is probably a slightly different one, because 15.4 is a lot of money for a player that's not getting a couple of returns every single week. But I don't think the last 2 fixtures are going to narrate what we think is going to happen in the next 4 fixtures, given that 2 of those are the worst defences in the league so far. Bournemouth play a pretty expansive style, and Brighton have been caught with their pants down by Chelsea and then Spurs in the first half as well, with their high line. So I kind of think that Haaland is going to be more likely, I'd say, to score back-to-back hat-tricks than he was at the start of the season, when he obviously went and did so. So, yeah, I think there's just no way I'm getting rid of him now. If you don't have him, then you might comfort yourself with arguments like, oh, De Bruyne's not fully fit, Foden's not been a factor really. So is he getting the sort of service that we would need from him to be a 15 million plus asset? That is an argument, but the counter argument is those are such good fixtures that Haaland, just on team ability alone, even minus Rodri, minus De Bruyne, even if Foden's not back, you still back them to create plenty of chances for him, and all he needs is a half chance to get a goal or 2. So I'm still thinking it's worth holding on to for the next 4. I would be open to getting rid of him later on if those players aren't back and factors, though, in the fixtures turn. I think that's a different conversation.
Yeah, I thought it doesn't bother me with Haaland at all. Like, the fixtures don't really turn, I don't think, at any point. Do they?
Not massively. They weaken a little bit, but not massively.
Yeah, City are a difficult fixture. It's kind of they're the same logic as Arsenal. You're kind of like, well, yeah, there's only one bad fixture for them, and that's Man City. And we say that about Salah as well. We'll speak about it in a minute. That there's only one bad fixture for him, which again was Man City. Really, throughout the course of things, I mean, I just don't. I almost don't see a world really. And again, this year with all the sexiness surrounding going no Haaland and being quite debonair about that, I just don't see a world where I get rid of him. Really, which probably sounds a bit boring, and maybe it's quite freeing again to go without him and try to figure it all out. So I can see how that could be really fun. Maybe my cojones have been eroded by a few bad years, but hey, there we go. The Foden segue here is obviously worth a quick chat, because I had him in the wildcard draft that I mentioned a couple of weeks back. Ultimately didn't go there, went with Luis Diaz, which is probably about as useful as Foden has been. But he's always going to be a factor, isn't he, Nick? Decent-ish underlying XGI against Man City. And with no De Bruyne last year, that he suddenly stepped up and became the player we always wanted him to be, got that kind of 200 club membership. Even though, yes, you're likely to be sticking with Palmer over Foden for now at a really discounted price, like not 9.2. Surely he's going to be a factor at some point in the season.
Oh yeah, certainly. I'm sure Foden, we saw what he could do last season. He was the player of the year ultimately and put in some amazing performances. At the Euros, unfortunately, did flatter to deceive to a certain extent. And the start of this campaign, obviously, he's not had too many minutes, but he's not been able to achieve much at all with the minutes he has played. He's had a bit of competition for starts with the likes of Grealish and obviously Doku and Savio and players like that also getting more minutes than Foden. It's just a tricky one at the moment because I think in the back of my mind 4 game weeks ago, I basically had penciled it in that I was going to bring in Foden, either for Palmer or Palmer this week or maybe for Saka. And just looking at, Arsenal's and Chelsea's fixtures and Liverpool's fixtures, they're all playing each other. They're all playing Newcastle or Aston Villa as well. Their next 4 are terrible. And Manchester City, they've got some fantastic fixtures. Whilst everyone else has terrible fixtures, Manchester City, they're playing Wolves, Southampton, Bournemouth, Brighton next. I mean, unless you threw in Leicester and Ipswich, that would be like the perfect run ultimately. So why not triple up with Manchester City? Obviously, Haaland, in my head, people have had a bit of fun not owning him, but for the next 4, he does feel like a must own. And I think I'm going to be back on the captaincy. No messing around with differential captain picks for me. He's back on Haaland. And just the whole plan was triple up, get Foden in. And he's just done nothing so far. So I don't want to be selling Palmer, certainly, considering the performances Palmer's been putting in with 4 goal first half, 4 goals in one half, for instance. So, and then I look at the other Man City midfielders, and Rodri's out injured, of course. De Bruyne's out injured, and you look, Bernardo Silva, people like that aren't really real FPL picks, are they? So there's not too many other options for City. So it's a tricky one. I think if you're fancying a bit of a punt and you want to kind of catapult yourself up there, why not bring in Foden and even throw the armband on him, and you might be able to boost your rank by 2 million if you're sitting in the 3 millions or something like that, and get all the plaudits for doing something like that. But it's not for me in terms of the position I'm in at this moment in time.
It's a bit kayfabe to be saying that you'll be throwing the armband on Foden off.
Just for him. Well, I could just end this call. 3 days later, I'm like, right, sell Palmer, put on Foden, and see how it works. See how the weekend goes.
It's definitely not a thing, is it?
50 points. 1,000 Twitter likes or whatever.
There's always the argument I made that FPL is something about projecting, where they're forecasting the next kind of big thing almost, and that's kind of why I ended up with Brendan Johnson or Ronaldo this week. So I was thinking, the Spurs run is quite good. I've got Watkins, who we'll speak about in a second, so I want to kind of keep him, and then blah blah blah, and so on and so on. So Foden could be a thing, but Sam, it just feels like he's not really a priority right now, especially with the jostling for position perhaps of the rest of the guys that we've kind of mentioned here, and the sizable investment we need to make. It's kind of, it would definitely reward somebody who goes there early and gets the payoff. But equally, if it doesn't kind of quite fit into place until kind of late November or something like that, it's almost like you want to kind of have the points elsewhere and then move into him because you've got the route to, almost.
Yeah, I feel like when you see a player that's just been struggling to make his way back to full fitness and get into the side for this long now, it would be okay if it was a week or 2. We saw even Watkins building up fitness at the start of the season a little bit. But with Foden, it feels like it's been more of an issue, more problematic. And yes, he's gotten a couple of starts now, one in Champions League, I think goal assist in that, and then obviously in the league as well. But he definitely didn't look quite himself. And I'm pretty sure he's gone away with England on the international break. I will have to see whether he pulls out or just goes ahead.
Yeah, England just posted the photo of him
Nice.
at St George's, so he's fine.
Is it a photo of him leaving the camp to go rest for 2 weeks?
Looking wistfully across the training fields.
Wistfully would be the right word. So I think with Foden at the moment, it is a bit too much of a leap of faith. I think both of us actually messaged each other at the exact same time last week saying it's on the cards to get rid of, I think, Diaz and Trent for Porro and Foden ahead of game week 8. I think we both kind of labelled that as the bus team move to make in the international break, and neither of those are really sitting right with me at the moment. There might be better avenues to go down, and Palmer's fixture this week obviously isn't ideal, but I'd almost prefer to leave that a week, let it roll, and get Palmer a week later when he's going up against slightly weaker opposition than a Foden that, okay, he's got a great couple of fixtures, but if he's not anywhere near on it and he's being nursed back to full fitness and not guaranteed to start, and he's less central to the way City create goals, or less talismanic, let's say, then I'd probably just prefer to wait the week and go for Palmer, possibly even do it this week as a bit of a tilt. But yeah, that's the way I see it at the moment. Just possibly too much of a leap of faith on hoping that he just all of a sudden turns into the Phil Foden that we know he can be, just out of nowhere.
Yeah, no, that leap of faith is definitely a thing. And Foden and Palmer this week is playing Liverpool, who are, I believe, top of the table, aren't they? And most people have moved off Salah now. They've got 3 home games in the next 4. Admittedly, it's all a little bit dicey. Chelsea at home, Arsenal away, Brighton at home, and Villa at home. So none of those fixtures on paper look any good, really. But they're all kind of quite good attacking fixtures. But most have sold in some way, shape, or form, I suppose. But still kind of ticking up to the 60% effective ownership. The sales for Salah are kicking in a little bit. Sold by over 100,000 people right now, and it kind of pushes you to think about where you are with Liverpool almost, because none of us own him. I think he'd be he's one of those that, you know, in days gone by, he'd be the perennial, you know what, same as what we're saying with Palmer, and you were saying with Palmer, Nick, just leave him there. It's absolutely fine. But Sam, you know, in preseason, I was saying that maybe this is going to be the year. One of my bold claims is that there's a baton pass between Salah and Saka. Actually, Saka becomes kind of the man. And if I go back in time, I'd push it to Palmer. But I think there's more sort of breadth of pedigree behind Saka. With Salah, what do you make of how he started the season? Do you think that he's going to be one of those players that you would keep if you didn't own, or is he one of those who now is a bit more kind of situational?
Situational is a really good word for it, actually. And you asked me what I make of his start to the season. I still think Salah, the player, is still very much an FPL option. He's still fantastic. He's still going to hoard points throughout the year if he's on the pitch. There's one little asterisk I give to that, is that he doesn't seem to want to take on players with the ball just as much as he used to anymore. He more looks to run beyond the defenders and get the ball beyond them, breaking with pace. So that's maybe one little asterisk. But the main thing that would be a concern for me, and that takes him down a notch from the I'm going to play him no matter what to more of a situational pick, as you mentioned, is that Slot's attitude to his wingers seems to be quite different to Klopp's, or more specifically towards Salah, the winger, is quite different to Klopp's, in that Klopp would very, very rarely ever take him off until at least the second half of the season. And even then, it was once in a blue moon. It was every maybe 5-6 game weeks he might get taken off 10 to 15 minutes early at most. Whereas now, I think there's much more of an openness to bringing him off early on. And we saw with Slot previously as well, he does rotate his wingers and take them out of the firing line around the 65th, 70th minute a lot more regularly. we thought that Salah was maybe immune to that. I don't think he is. I think that given his age profile, given the fact he's running at defenders less, I think they're much more likely now than ever before to use him for a more limited amount of time. Not every week, but some weeks, maybe after a Champions League tie, for instance. Use him for 70 minutes and then bring on the great depth that they've got to stretch the game further, bring on the fresh legs, and maybe not rely on him for the full 90 every single week as we've seen in the past. And I think for that, it brings him down a little notch and does make him, as you stated, situational.
Yeah, it's worrying, isn't it? Almost. So it's almost like, Nick, we always said that we devoted more time on WGTA for the first 5, 6, 7 years. Certainly when you were on talking about Salah, the first year we were on was the 303 season, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It does feel like it's kind of reaching a bit of a magnanimous sort of conclusion with him, where it's like, thanks for all the points, but maybe at the moment he's not, the fear factor, the FOMO, it's sort of gone, hasn't it?
I think it was a little bit like that actually last season, but yeah, I mean, it's worth highlighting that 7 seasons that he's been in the 200 club in a row. Not sure if that's an FPL record, but it's bloody well impressive.
Oh, it definitely
he's,
is.
he every season he's just absolutely smashed it, and I think last season both Trent and him surprisingly weren't really in the zeitgeist at any point, and that was because of the price and the cost. And we couldn't fit them in, and obviously that's also because of the rise of Haaland. And this guy Haaland at the moment he costs 15.4 million. He's 15 million at the start of the season. When you're getting Haaland in, how the hell can you fit in Salah? And when it becomes a choice between Haaland and Salah, unfortunately, it is Haaland for me that wins. But there's no discounting that there is a strategy, and you can do just as well if you went for a sort of a Haalandless and sort of Salah strategy in FPL. Ultimately, he has over 60 points at the moment. There's only 3 players at this moment in time with over 60 points, and Salah's one of them. And I would definitely not bet against him getting into that 200 club yet again this season. So certainly I think for the next few fixtures a bit tougher. He's probably one just to ignore. His ownership isn't as scary as it has been in seasons gone by. Again, that's because of Haaland. But if Haaland didn't exist, we'd probably all be owning Salah. Probably all be captaining him most weeks. He'd probably have an ownership or effective ownership of over 100% every week. So certainly because Haaland's in the game, we just can't afford him, and there's better ways to play with the likes of Saka and Palmer and a few of the guys that are at least sort of 2.5 million cheaper. So I really, obviously, my views on Salah. I think he's an amazing player. I think he still is that key man at Liverpool, that critical asset. But there are, as you mentioned, Sam, that there are other players at Liverpool that are knocking on Slot's door saying, where are my minutes? And then, I played that whole game around, do I think Diaz will cover Salah? And I was a bit nervous because I was listening to the pod, you guys talk when with your wild cards, just Gameweek 5, you're captaining Salah, and I was like, crap, I don't actually own him. I'm going to get punished here, and I really got away with it with the kind of the Diaz cover Salah strategy over those few weeks. But in the long run, I think Salah's going to probably outscore Diaz relatively significantly, and he probably will be that key man again at Liverpool. And whether that punishes us in the long run because we go against him, I don't necessarily think so, because I think most managers, at least kind of the top managers, are probably going to also go for a Salah strategy. So it's kind of an ownership play there as well.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned obviously effectively the supporting cast, or the edge pieces, as a phrase Sam's introduced to the pod, begin to kind of, I guess, cover Salah. Is he the critical player, as you put it? Probably, but equally, where are we with Liverpool is quite an interesting question, and we'll definitely dig into this a bit more next week as well, Sam. But I mean, you and Nick are both Diaz owners, and I'm sure I'm not going to be breaking any embargoes by saying that Nick is almost definitely going to be sending for Bumo, I'm sure, next week, because he's a non-Bumo owner. It kind of feels like for this kind of tricky period, you're looking at a trend and thinking, yeah, okay, there's definitely I'm happy to leave you there because of what you could possibly do. But with Diaz, what we were kind of fearing, that sort of perennial sort of nagging doubt at the back of your mind definitely came home to roost this weekend with Gakpo getting the start. again, off he goes for international duty. And you look at the Chelsea game and you think, well, I don't know. We're beholden to leaks potentially for that one, but it is the late Sunday game, so I don't think we're going to get any of those. Could this be the time to kiss Diaz goodbye? I mean, Sam, come to you first, and then past Nick, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, with Diaz, he's caused me a lot of frustration already. I do have a bit of regret about going with him on the wild card. It was a bit of a last minute. I'm going to squeeze him in and find $1 million and downgrade elsewhere just to kind of cover off that spot. And he did feel like a good option, but I was always a little bit worried about the minutes. And now that he's gotten the bench, I didn't think he would get benched this week, but I was always a lot more concerned about what would happen after the international break. We saw after the previous one that Slot actually planned on rotating him out, given that he traveled back from South America. And he only started the game because Gakpo ended up injured coming back from the international break, I believe. So that was a bit situational. And I would be maybe a little bit worried that now happens again, knowing that Gakpo played well, obviously in game week 7. And we're going to also have the same problem again as we had facing us in game week 4 when they planned on benching him in the first place. I think the minutes will balance out, and I think he will start more often than not. But even if it's maybe 1 in every 4 that he's benched for, that's probably too much for me to hold on to an 8 million asset, especially with the fixtures to come as well and some of the other options around that price. Also, if we haven't really spoken about Trent yet, but I could look at moving both on and maybe find some extra money to upgrade the Diaz spot to one of the sub-premium midfielders who are a lot more secured, often on penalties, better data, 90-minute men, and tick a lot more boxes. I think for me, Diaz is probably a player I'm looking at getting rid of this week. I will do it last minute, though, because we probably won't get a leak, but it is maybe something I need to take into account, because if you've got a player of his ability starting and you know it's going to happen and everyone else has sold him, it'd be very, very typical for him to go and haul against Chelsea, who are missing 2 of their defenders that are starting every week so far.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you there with Diaz. I think he's a sell for me. Sorry, I can see Tom Campbell's mentioned something about me saying it's tough. Of course, I will say it's a tough decision, but actually probably not with Diaz. I think he didn't start this week. Mbumo has been smashing it. He's got 5 and 5. And United up next. It's an easy game, isn't it? So I think probably that's a swap for me. Get rid of him, and I think Diaz. I've got the points from him. Ultimately, I've got those in the bank since I put him in game week 3. It is time for a bit of a change, and with the fixture shift for Liverpool, it's a decent swap. I think there's other options. If I didn't go for Bumo, I might be looking at someone like Brennan Johnson, who you got in as well, Tom. Another decent pick in the midfield. A few of the other Spurs guys starting to shine as well, like the likes of Maddison or Kulusevski as well, potential options. So, I think Diaz is a sell for me right now, and I'm quite content actually, because I don't own Trent either. I'm quite content just for the next few, just going without Liverpool and seeing what happens. I don't feel like they're must-owns for the next few at least, and then I need to come up with a Liverpool plan at least, probably after the next 4.
Right, the final one, probably Watkins. So Nick, you and I both own Fulham, Bournemouth, Tottenham, Liverpool. Any plans to move off maybe in a few weeks, because you've got Slanky, who Sam owns, looking like he's very close to getting returns for him, and obviously like a good way of accessing some money for other things going forward, but still potentially one of those players who could be a bit of a season keeper. Did look, well, it was basically anonymous, wasn't he, against United? That was a big disappointment, because I was hoping that would be in my bold claim, which we've got next week. I was expecting that to be kind of a goal-laden game. Didn't quite happen. So how are you feeling about Watkins at the moment?
I think Watkins is a hold for me, probably up until that Liverpool game. So I was looking at the forwards and who I'd sell him for, and I wasn't particularly enamoured by any of the options out there. Like, so, looking at even like the top scorers in the game, you've got Nico Jackson and Havertz, and they've got a bit of a fixture shift as we talked about. Welbeck doesn't really kind of, Watkins to Welbeck isn't particularly sexy, is it? So there's always Chris Wood banging them in as well. But I think Watkins, at least for the next few, is a hold. And then actually at the Liverpool game, that's when Solanke has Ipswich at home. And I feel like that's almost like the perfect swap at that moment in time. So if I'm going to do anything with Watkins, I think it might be a swap for Solanke when he has Ipswich at home and can kind of make that play. I think Solanke was not really involved at all in the goals against Brighton. He obviously got an assist, but in terms of XG and goal attempts, he had none at all, which was a bit disappointing. So I'm not kind of looking at a straight swap Watkins and Solanke right now. I think Watkins is going to score perhaps more in the next few, even with Solanke's better fixtures. But certainly when they play Ipswich at home, I feel like that's the swap to make at that moment in time.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that if I was a Watkins owner myself as well. The next three look great. Fulham, Bournemouth, Spurs. Wouldn't be worried about any of them from a Villa point of view or an attacking point of view for Villa. And then, the fixture shift after that looks like a good opportunity. A bit jealous, to be honest. I know he didn't really do anything in game week 7, but he's looked really sharp since regaining full match fitness. And I think he's kind of the best of the rest at the moment in terms of strikers out there beyond Haaland. And like Nick mentioned, there's fixture shifts for the likes of Havertz and Jackson as well. So I'd be very comfortably holding on to Watkins if I was either of you for the next three. With that in mind, though, shall we start taking a look at the teams? Probably starting with you two as Watkins owners currently. Let's see who's first up. Tom, you are first this week. Would you like to walk through your bus team so far?
Yeah, definitely. So I did in my wild card. I knew that obviously Semenyo was about to come in some dodgy fixtures, Arsenal, Villa, and City, and I've got the perfect solution to that. It's Leif Davis, who recorded a massive 0-pointer against West Ham, but Everton, Brentford, and Leicester the next three. I'm obviously Doughty. It's like Doughty, effectively, just hoping some attacking returns there. So I'm in a bit of a 4-4-2. Nick, you'd be appreciating this, you'd be loving this. If Lewis doesn't start against Wolves, then hey, you know what? I've got Semenyo coming off. If Mikhlenko is fit, maybe I'll move him to kind of first bench, see what happens. If Stewart is fit, then obviously that'd be really good because hopefully he'll start against Leicester. But it is what it is. I've got slightly kind of weak bench at the moment, but we'll see what flags are the crew basically over the international break. It's looking like at the moment that I'm kind of happy to kind of see this as a bit of a holding week, and a lot will hinge on basically if the captaincy goes off effectively. I'm not expecting much from the likes of Trent versus Chelsea, who have been performing actually a lot better. That fixture in the past would have probably been potentially an okay one, and this one I don't know. I think it's going to be a big test for Liverpool. I would be expecting to see like a 2-2 there. So hopefully Trent's on the attacking side of things, and Brennan Johnson against West Ham. Hopefully again he's going to come through the goods. I do think his ownership's going to kind of slightly kind of track, but with only scoring the 7, only in inverted commas, I think it's going to be a little bit different. So fairly okay with it, and we'll go into it a bit more next week on the pod, Sam. We've got a bit more knowledge of what's going on in the international break.
Absolutely. I'm next up. So 3-4-3 at the moment. Raya in goal, Lewis, Trent, and Gabriel at the back. Luis Diaz, Mbumo, Saka, Rogers across the middle, and 3 up top of Solanke. Haaland, captain at the moment. Don't think I'll be shifting off of him. And Calvert-Lewin currently starts away at Ipswich. I don't massively hate that. The clear issues at the moment revolve around Luis Diaz and what I'm going to do with him. Semenyo on my bench could start against Arsenal. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, but given the amount of money that I've got in Luis Diaz, I think I can find better elsewhere. And it wouldn't be the worst idea in the world, I don't think, to have a look at trying to bring in Palmer a little bit early. I also am fairly comfortable, and the longer I go on thinking about this, the more I'm confident, I suppose, that Liverpool's clean sheet run is probably going to come to an end over the next few. So if I read out their fixtures, it's Chelsea, Arsenal, Brighton, Villa, Southampton. That's the one that they probably will. And then it's Man City, Newcastle after that. I don't think there's too many clean sheets in there. So obviously Trent will get attacking returns dotted around and maybe the odd clean sheet I'm not expecting. But given the amount he's worth, I think I might be looking at making that double swap and trying to build up an extra couple of mil to use on the midfield to bolster Luis Diaz. And that might actually just be going straight for Palmer from the off, maybe even making a triple swap as well, which I'll go into more next week if I'm still considering it. But it might involve an Ipswich player and a Wolves player. So you can probably make your guesses from there. But yeah, that's me for now. And I think the one that we're all waiting for is, of course, flying high, Nick.
Yeah, so at the moment I've got a 3-5-2, so a different formation to you guys. So I do have 2 free transfers. I'm actually considering potentially using both. My bench is a mess, but I'm ignoring that for the moment. I still have Luis Diaz, and I've also having to play Semenyo just because I don't have any other options. So I'm actually considering getting rid of both those guys. So I mentioned earlier that Diaz might go for Bumo. Most people seem to own him. He's got a decent fixture run still, so and he's also on brilliant form. So seems like a straight swap, easy swap to make. And then I was also looking to sell Semenyo. Unfortunately, I couldn't actually afford Brennan Johnson. That would have been a really good move to make if I could do it, but I can't afford him. So I was looking at potential options. Semenyo's fixtures are also pretty bad now. One I was considering was McNeil or McGoops, as we like to refer to him as in our Slack group. But McNeil at Everton still has some really good fixtures coming up. I know you guys denigrated him on the pods the other week, and then he punished you with a decent return. And yeah, he's only 5.6, so he's certainly a consideration, but definitely not one that's nailed in terms of actually what I'm doing right now. I need to kind of have a little look around and see if there's any other options that kind of suit my fancy ahead of the deadline. And if there's no one really, I might end up just sticking with the menu and keeping that transfer and going into next week with two FTs. So no decisions made. Captain is Haaland, obviously, as I said.
Looks good to me. Yeah, well, fingers crossed. Obviously, we'll be coming back to you throughout the season as well, Nick, and tracking just how high you do fly. And I think from all of us and anyone listening, we all hope you go on and win it for us. It would be absolutely fantastic if you did. Tom, any final words before we wrap up the pod?
No, I think that's absolutely it. Thanks for coming on, Nick.
Yeah, thank you, Nick.
For having me.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you all as well for listening. We are, as always, Who Got the Assist. You can find us on X at WGTA_FPL. You can find myself at FPL Pricey, and again on Instagram and Threads, it's WGTA.FPL or FPL Pricey on there. Nick, where can we find you? Is it the WGTA?
At WGTA_Nick if you want to give me a follow. I don't tweet very often. No, I have done in the last couple of game weeks just because I've been doing particularly well and getting lots of new followers on Twitter, which is always nice to see. So yeah, if you want to follow me, you can find me there. But as I said, I'm not particularly active these days.
Perfect. Well, we'll probably do a Nick watch on the pod every week from now on anyway as well. So you can either follow Nick or you can tune in here and we'll get a live rank update from you. But again, thank you all so much. If you did enjoy the pod, if you could follow us on the socials, especially Nick, that would be really greatly appreciated. Give the pod a 5-star rating wherever you're listening as well, Spotify, iTunes, whatever. And of course, if you could leave a like or subscribe on YouTube, again, that would be greatly appreciated. That does really help us out.
Yeah, all these things help the pod get out there. Thanks, Sam, and thanks for coming on, Nick. Just like the old days, the old Dude brothers back together again. Bop. Yeah. We hope you enjoyed the pod. Next week, we're back on Monday to continue on with the topic we kind of touched on, provided there's no catastrophe on international break, which means a swerve and intention elsewhere, to have a look at how all the teams are doing, a rundown of the top 20. They're all the top teams, 20 Premier League teams and their key men ahead of the next 4. I hope you enjoy the break this weekend. Speak soon.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist?